Okay, good afternoon, grade 12, and welcome back to our subject, 21st Century Literature from the Philippines and the World. Let's begin with a short prayer. Almighty and Heavenly Father, guide us as we continue our studies about the 21st century literature, that we may be able to use our learnings, our knowledge in glorifying you and your name. May everything we will learn this afternoon be useful in our studies, in our future career, and may be able to use them in uplifting the spirit of our brothers and sisters. We also ask for your special guidance, especially we ask you to bless our connectivity that we may continually attend this session. We lift up to our parents, our school, our administrations and administrators, that they may be able to help each other in preparing us, preparing the students in facing the challenges in this 21st century. All of this we lift up to you in the holy name of Jesus. Amen. So, muli magandang hapon sa inyong lahat and welcome back to 21st Century Literature class. Okay, so first, I would like to apologize for not being able to be with you synchronously for the first lesson, but rest assured that later in this 2-hour periods of 21st century literature that I'll be with you. Okay, so before we move on to our lesson and to some important reminders, let me first commend those who got good scores in the recently concluded first mid-quarterly exam. So we have some top-notchers for the first mid-quarterly exam. Of course, we have Kay Balida, who got 37 out of 40, Kelry and Ralph, who got 35 out of 40, and LMA, who got 34 over 40. A virtual clap for the top-notchers. But don't worry, because all of you got good scores, and as I look into the record, all of you got 30 and above in the exam. So that's a high score, although no one gets the perfect score, maybe in the quarterly exam. Okay, so the next thing I would like to focus on is the schedule of topics. And if we are aware of the calendar, okay, for this particular month, okay, so we only have this meeting for us to be able to finish the remaining lessons assigned for this quarter. So this afternoon, I'll be finishing 3 lessons. As you can see on the slide, lesson 2 will be the literary genres, elements, structures, and traditions. Then lesson 3 will be the canonical authors and works of Philippine national artists in literature. And lesson 4 will be the texts and authors from each region, but focusing on Calabarzon. Okay, so of course, the next meeting will already be in the first quarterly exam scheduled come September 26 to 29. Okay, so because we'll be taking 3 lessons for this afternoon, we'll be having all these lessons as the coverage for our exam. So whatever we'll be able to finish this afternoon will be our pointers for review. Okay, so let's just have a very quick review of our lesson 1. So if you still remember, we were only able to meet once before the quarterly exam, and it's just a kind of a historical survey of the kind of history of literature in the Philippines, how it evolved through time from the pre-colonial to the colonial to the post-colonial periods. And in lesson 1, we kind of just focus on the important or significant features for each period, especially when we were colonized by the Spaniards, the Americans, and the Japanese. So there have been shifts, or there have been changes, and we kind of focused on the effect of those changes in terms of literature. Okay, but today, with lesson number 2, we'll be focusing more on the literary genres. Okay, and we'll be able to look into the elements, structures, and traditions in connection to those literary genres. Okay, so we'll still have to follow the chronological pattern, chronological approach, starting from the pre-colonial up to the present time. But this time, the focus will be really on the literary genres, the kinds of compositions, the different forms or formats that are part of the literary history of the Philippines. Okay, so for the competency for this particular lesson, okay, the expected competency after this lesson is for the students to be able to compare and contrast the various 21st century literary genres and the ones from the earlier genres and periods, citing their elements, structures, and traditions. So this presentation of the competency hopefully will kind of prepare you and help you know what to expect in this particular lesson. So we'll be going through some more details, some minute details regarding the different kinds of compositions, or we call literary genres. Okay, because it's good to see how each and every one of them kind of differ from one another. It kind of enriches our and deepens our understanding about literature. Okay, so if you're able to type in the comment section below, I'm asking you to do this particular activity. But if you're not able to do it, it's fine. You may just prepare your answer so that when you're called later during the synchronous, during the class, you will be able to give your answers. So this open activity is simply asking you to comment or to type on the comment section 5 literary genres that you know. So this is a kind of a test also for me to learn what you know about what we call literary genre. Okay, so I'm giving you a few seconds to do that. Okay, some of these literary genres we were able to mention already in lesson number 1. But if you have other literary genre on your mind that you would like to add, you may comment it below. Okay, 10 seconds. Okay, let's proceed. So that activity hopefully is able to prepare us, and hopefully it serves as a jumping board to the lesson, okay, which again is focused on literary genre. So what do you mean by literary genre? Well, first and foremost, what do you mean by literature? So when we speak about literature, okay, if we kind of um, understand the discussion last time, it is referring to any collection of written works. Okay, so it would include a lot of forms, a lot of kinds. Okay, because when we speak of literature, it's really a broad term, but it is also used nowadays more narrowly for writing specifically considered to be an art form. Okay, so there is a kind of a special group of written works that show artistry, and that would be considered really as part of the literature. Now, when we speak about literary genre, okay, so these are the different kinds of write-ups or written works that make up what we call literature. Okay, so literary genre is a category of literary composition, and genres may be determined by literary technique, tone, content, or even, as in the case of fiction, length. Okay, so later, through the discussion, you will understand better this particular description. But what it says is that we have different genres because there are differences, for example, in the technique that was used by the writer, the tone, the content, and sometimes even the length, the number of words used in a particular composition or written work. Okay, so because of those differences, we now have different genres. Okay, and the most general genre in literature would include the epic, tragedy, comedy, and creative nonfiction. So later we'll be going to the details of some of these literary genres that are mentioned in this particular slide. So I will reserve the explanations and the detailed descriptions of them in a while. Okay, so let's move to the specific literary genres that existed in our country, the literary genres in the Philippines. So what we can notice, of course, if we go to the different books, the different sources, is the reality that there is a multiplicity of Philippine literature that progressed alongside our very rich history. Okay, so we have many different genres nowadays, and in the past, because uh, we we have a very rich past, we have a very colorful history, and the themes of our literature are rooted in the context of, again, the pre-colonial cultural traditions, the socio-political histories of our colonial and even contemporary ways. So what we are saying is that the literary genres really are rooted, connected with the experiences, the actual experiences of the Filipinos in history. Okay. However, some Filipinos would, as I've said in the past lesson, encounter or would exhibit unfamiliarity with the literature of the past, essentially due to what has been taught upon us that our country was discovered, and hence our history began in March 1521. So that's not true. Our history goes farther than March 1521, even before the Spanish uh, colonization started. We already have our literary forms, different kinds of maybe oral traditions that later on would be put into writing. So again, what's sad is that we are familiar, as I've said last time, maybe with the Greek mythology or with Roman mythology, but we are very, very unfamiliar with our very own mythologies. Okay, it's good that nowadays with the pageants, with different programs in the television, from time to time, these mythologies, this belief, this works of art of Filipinos in the ancient past are now being mentioned, and somehow we are getting some ideas of the things that have been believed and have been the product of imagination of ancient Filipinos. Now, through the comprehensive works of archaeologists, anthropologists, and even what are called as ethnologists, we have known more information about the pre-colonial times. If you still remember, last time I gave Halia as an example, the moon goddess of the Bicoland in the Bicolandia. Okay, and somehow we are able to kind of get in touch with our very own culture, with the ancient past of our country through this kind of findings, especially by archaeologists, anthropologists, and ethnologists. Now, let's move on to the specific genres for each of the periods in our history. Many of them we are familiar with, but it's good to kind of recall some of them, as later on in the assignment part, this will be the topic, or this will be the things that you will have to research on. Okay, so in the pre-colonial period, there had already been riddles in the Philippines. Okay, there have been proverbs, songs, chants, epics, myths, legends, fables, and folk tales. So the pre-colonial Filipinos demonstrated rich lived experiences which were orally expressed in speeches and songs, in narratives, and even in rituals, and even in what we call mimetic dances. Okay, when we say mimetic dances, people or the different tribes, for example, would imitate the movements. Okay, so mimetic, the movements, for example, of animals. Okay, so they will copy how the animals would move, and that's kind also of expressing their thoughts, their insights about the things that they find in their surrounding. Okay, so we now move on to this specific genres or kinds of compositions that we have on our slide. So I'll go to each one of them, and hopefully you can relate, you can remember an example for each of them. So the first one is riddle, in Tagalog, bugtong. So we say bugtong, they are mystifying statements or questions phrased and rhymed to require ingenuity in determining its answer. So you really have to be critical, you have to analyze the words used to get the answer. So these are presented as a game and considered as forms of entertainment during the earlier times. So that's the purpose. It's one of the games in the ancient times. So they don't have yet the internet, they don't have plays. So what they do is to kind of test their mental ability. And one of the things that they would use is riddle. So for the Visayans, these are called tigmo. For the Tagalogs, bugtong. For the Ilonggos, paktakon. And for the Bicolanos, atototon. So take note of those terms because they might appear in your exam. All of them are referring to what we call in English as riddles. So here are two examples. Okay, tigmo. Okay, so when you say, again, tigmo, it's the Visayan term. And here is an example. Baboy sa lasang, ang tunok puro lansang. A wild pig in the forest is covered with spikes. Okay, so the correct answer here is nangka. Is maybe because of the shape and the size. Okay, jackfruit, it kinds of represent a baboy, a wild pig, and then the spikes, okay, will be like a tinik o tunok. Okay, and with this description, okay, we might get the answer nangka, okay, or jackfruit. Then an example of paktakon, if for the Ilonggos, ano nga tuburan masulog sa tag-init, ginabubsan kong tag-ulan. What spring flows in summer and runs dry on rainy days? Okay, the correct answer is balhas or sweat. Okay, so because when it's summer, yan, so it will well up on our skin, But when it's cold, it's rainy days, it kinds of runs dry. We do not sweat that much. Okay, I know and I believe that you have your own example of bugtong. Okay, so si Ella May, si Kay, si Nika, si Kellery, si Sam, si Simon, si Ralph, si Jerome, si Brian. Yan, alam ko po, may alam din kayong mga bugtong. Okay, may isa akong alam, no? Sabi ng bugtong, naabot na ng kamay, ipinagawa pa sa tulay. So you'll notice mayroon pang mga rhymes. Okay? Naabot na ng kamay, ipinagawa pa sa tulay. Ang sagot, kubyertos. Okay. Yung ating spoon at saka fork. Okay, we also have the bugtong, isa ang pinasukan, tatlo ang nilabasan. Okay, so I know you know the answer. No, T-shirt. Okay, isa yung sinuotan natin, pinasukan ng ating ulo, pero tatlo yung nilabasan. Isa para sa ulo at saka dalawa para sa kamay, sa braso. Okay, so I hope you can also give your own example of bugtong or riddle. The next one is what we call proverbs, sawikain, sometimes salawikain, or sarsarita in Ilocano. Philippine proverbs are wise sayings that prescribe codes of behavior, mirror societal norms, traditions, and beliefs, and impart lessons in brief rhyming verse. So they teach us life lessons. They remind us of important values. That's why I love proverbs. Okay, so they also kind of serve us as a reflection of the community. Bakit ba nabuo itong proverb na ito? There could have been things happening in the community that made them start formulating the sawikain or salawikain. Okay, so we have your example of a proverb about guilt for the Ilocanos. Ti agutak, isot na gitlog. Okay, who cackles laid the egg. Kasi nung unang pumutak, siya ang nangitlog. Siya yung guilty, siya yung may kasalanan. Siya yung unang nagsalita. No? Parang too defensive. Yan. Kaya nahuhuli siya sa sarili niyang bibig, sa sarili niyang salita. Tiagutak, isot na gitlog. For the Hiligaynoons, they have also these proverbs on suffering. Kung hindi ikaw mag-antos, hindi ka gid magsantos. If you don't sacrifice, you can't be a saint. Okay, if you don't sacrifice, you can be a saint. Okay, the message is clear. Okay, suffering is part of becoming a saint. And going back to the lives of the saints that we know, we will realize really that this is something that they have been through many challenges. Okay, so let's move on to another genre called songs. So this particular term, songs, is a broad term, but under it there are specific genres. So when we say songs, these are forms of folk lyric that speak volumes of the typical rural lives and reflect people's aspirations and lifestyles. And here are some of the categories of our ancestral songs. Of course, we have the folk songs or awit ng bayan. We have lullaby, and of course, we have serenade or harana. Yan. So may alam ba kayong harana? Uso pa ba ang harana? Okay, some examples of folk songs, awit ng bayan. These are songs with lines often described as repetitive, didactic, and sonorous. Okay, so an example is Magtanim ay di biro. I know you're so familiar with it. Magtanim ay di biro, maghapong nakayupo, di man lang makaupo, di man lang makatayo, braso ko'y namamanhid, baywang ko'y nangangawit, binti ko'y namimitig sa pagkababad sa tubig. And so on and so forth. Another example from the Visayas is Dandansoy. Dandansoy bayaan ta ikaw, pauli ako sa bayaw. Okay, so those are samples of very sonorous songs we call awit ng bayan. So don't worry, you will have your time to record and to sing because that's one of your performance tests. Okay, so for the lullaby, these are soothing songs often sung to put babies to sleep. We have samples. Okay, Do Aya from if I'm not mistaken, from the north, from the Ilocos, and Ili Ili Tulug Anay. I'm more familiar with the Ili Ili Tulug Anay. When I was still a music teacher, I used to teach this in two voices, in split voice. Ili tulog anay, wala diri imong nanay, kadto tienda bakal papay, ili tulog anay. And after the song stops, hopefully the baby is already sleeping. So lullaby or uyayi, pampatulog. Of course, you have another group of songs we call serenade or harana. So these are used in courtships, especially by young men who will try to capture the heart of the girl they love by singing, okay, with accompaniment of a guitar usually. In movies, there are different versions wherein they would even bring a set of drums, but the typical one is one accompanied um, by the guitar. Okay, so examples that we can add for the serenade are Sarumbangi and O Ilaw. Sarumbangi sa higdaan, nakadangog ako, inuninin sarunggamgam sa luba ko, katorogan, bako kundi simong boses siyo palan. So the Tagalog version says, isang gabi, maliwanag, ako'y naghihintay sa aking magandang dilag, namamanglaw ang puso ko at ang diwa ko'y lagi nang nangangarap. Malasin mo giliwang saksi ng aking pagmamahal. Ika'y nagniningning kislap ng talat liwanag ng buwan. And so on and so forth. Then another one is O Ilaw. O ilaw, o ilaw, sa gabing madilim, sa gabing madilim. Yeah, may second voice. Wangis mo'y, bituin sa langit. Okay, so those are examples of beautiful serenades used by men to court young women. Another group of writings or written works or literature is what we call chants, and chants are used to give respect, excuse, or apology to unseen or other elemental spirits our ancestors believed in to deliver them from danger or harm. And moreover, these are utilized in enchantments and even in witchcraft. Yan. So kapag galit na galit yung isang Pilipino, they can also use chants. Okay, so maybe we're familiar still from time to time we hear our elderly relatives saying some of them. Tabi-tabi po ingko, makikiraan po lamang. Or in Ilocano, bari-bari po apo, bisbulati tao. Okay, ito naman parang curse, parang witchcraft. No? Ikaw ang nagnanako ng bigas ko, Lumuwa sana ang mata mo, mamaga sana ang katawan mo, patayin ka ng mga anito. Okay, so those are examples of chants. Again, they are parts of our culture, of our past. Okay, so in Tagalog, this chants can be rendered as bulong, yung mga bulong, mga binubulong-bulong ng ating mga ninuno. Okay, the next one is a familiar one. We already kind of mentioned a bit about it. But again, when we speak about epics, they are long narrative accounts of heroic exploits. Examples of these are the Darangin in Maranao, Aliguyon at Hudhud in Ifugao, Ibalon in Bicol. Okay, so an example is a Guman or epic of the Subadan people of Zamboanga, which is chanted during buklog or festivals. Its title is Agtubignog Kibuklagan, the kingdom of Kibuklagan. So there are specific times or festivities wherein they tell these long narratives or these epics. Okay, so if we're talking about heroes, long narratives about heroes, the extraordinary events surrounding their lives, they are called epics. But when we say myths, these are symbolic narratives, usually of unknown origin and at least partially traditional, that ostensibly relate actual events and are especially associated with religious beliefs. Okay, mga Dios, the story about gods and goddesses, about Bathala. Okay, ancient Filipino myths would include the story of Bathala, ang pag-aaway ng dagat at langit. Okay, the story about the Tigmamanukin, okay, and maybe also the Sari Manok. Okay, so those are examples. It is the story about Bakunawa and Halia. They are examples of myths, mito. We also have what we call legend. Okay, so I'm giving you this important terms together with the things that kind of make them different from other genres. So when we speak of legends, these are stories that explain the origin, no? Pinanggalingan, pinagsimulan, and phenomena in the surrounding world. Okay, the things that we notice nowadays have stories. People try to explain why they are like this. Okay, some of the most famous legends are the legend of Maria Makiling, the legend of Mayon, and the legend of Sampaguita. When I was still a kid, my tatay would sing a song, and later on, as I tried to analyze the lyrics, it's a legend, the legend of the dogs and cats. So the fight between the dogs and cats. It starts this way. Noong unang panahon, bata pa ang mundo, magkaibigan raw ang pusa at aso. Sila'y magkasalo, laging magkasundo, sapagkat alaga ng isang amo. And then the story goes and explains bakit sila nagkagalit. No? So ang storya, nung umalis yung amo, nag-iwan siya ng relyeno sa table at binantayan ng aso at pusa, nakatulog yung aso, kinain ng pusa. Pero nung dumating yung amo, ang tinuro ng pusa na salirin ay yung aso. And from that day on, okay, the dog will always kind of chase the cat. Yan, kasi binugbog siya ng amo. Okay, so those are examples of legends. Mga pinagmulan. And then we also have our own fables. Okay, siguro natatandaan niyo pa yung mga kwento about pagungat ang matching. Isa sa mga pinakasikat until now is ang koneho at ang pagong. So these are brief stories of the children of the native Filipinos. And these talk about supernatural or extraordinary people, and usually follow in the form of narration that demonstrates a useful truth. These stories use animals as characters. So that's one of the best kind of difference that the fables do have. that they use animals as characters to represent a particular attribute or characteristic. Isa na nga dyan yung magandang halimbawa itong kwento ng koneho at ang pagong. So the conejo and the pagong represent a particular attribute or characteristic. Okay. Then we also have what we call the folk tales. These are stories that deal with the power of of nature personified. Their submission to a deity and how the deity is responsible for the blessings and curses in the forms of calamities. These are often passed on from generation to generation by word of mouth. But of course, nowadays they have been already kind of put into writing. So there are authors like Mabel Cook Cole who tried to compile some of these folk tales. Again, the power of nature personified, the calamities and even blessings. So if the stories would revolve around these topics, then we can consider them as folk tales. Now we move on to the Spanish period, and this time there had been a shift again under the Spanish colonizers who ruled our country for more than 300 years. They used, of course, the cross and the religion to impose changes in among the natives. And of course, with these new things that had been introduced to us, okay, our history as a nation somehow experienced kind of changes also in terms of our traditions, our lifestyle, and our beliefs. So I know you're familiar with these changes through your social science subjects in the past. So all those things that you've learned about Philippine history serve as a background, especially for this particular period. And again, these changes, the introduction of a new religion kind of influenced immensely even our literature. So from those rural things that would happen in the urban setting and the rural setting rather have been changed and replaced by new topics. So kung dati pinag-usapan yung mga buhay, karanasan, life lessons, this time with the coming of Christianity in our country and the deepening of the Christian faith among the believers, what kind of surfaced are hymns, tales about the saints, miracles, and teachings of the church. So most of the writings became religious, okay? And of course, later on, there will also be kind of development, and aside from the religious write-ups, there will also be secular, and later on there will be even propaganda and revolutionary literature. Okay, but let's first begin with these genres that are on our slide. So number one is awit. Again, this is a broad term, okay, and it's referring to a specific group of songs. Okay, so in the earlier part, okay, we have songs as a collective term referring to harana, uyayi, okay, and folk songs. But this time, during the Spanish period, the term awit or song will also have its own connotation. Okay, so we also have corrido, karagatan, duplo, prose narratives, and zarzuela. Let's first go to awit. So these have measures of 12 syllables and are slowly sung to the accompaniment of a guitar or bandurria. Okay, bandurria is another stringed instrument, part of the rondalla, if you're familiar in music, okay, with the rondalla. And Francisco Baltasar's Florante at Laura is the best example for awit. Okay, and usually it's dodecasyllabic. Kasi dodica is this prefix is actually a a number, if I'm not mistaken, in Latin. Okay. Uno, due, tre, quatuor, quinque, sexaptant, octonovim, decim, undecim, duodecim. Okay, so when we say duodecim, dodeca, it means 12. So there are 12 syllables in a line. Okay, so that's what we call awits. It's referring to a specific genre. Okay, so you can, of course, remember the term dodecasyllabic, 12 syllables. Now, there's another kind of literature called corrido, and these are metrical romances and tales that follow a structure of a poem. So you can see here the influence of the Spaniards, the idea of kings or prince, and these have measures of 8 syllables. So this time octosyllabic, and they are recited to a martial beat, like a march. And more often, these are tales of chivalry, where a knight saves a princess. Okay, an example will be Ibong Adarna, okay, wherein a king has 3 sons, and they try their best to take home the Ibong Adarna to heal their sick father. So it's a story about chivalry. And of course, we can decipher, we can see from the story some elements that are coming from a kingdom, from the Spanish kingdom. Okay, we also have later on a different literature called the Karagatan, and this is a poetic vehicle of a social religious nature that is celebrated surprisingly during the death of a person. So I have here a Tagalog description. Maybe we can understand it better this way. Ang tulang ito, karagatan, ay ginagamit sa laro. Kadalasan, ito ay ginaganap sa namatayan o may lamay at may matandang tutula ukol sa paksa ng laro. Mayroong tabo na paikutin at kung saan matatapat ang hawakan ng tabo ay siyang sasagot sa tanong ng isang dalaga na may matalinhagang bugtong at matalinhaga rin namang sasagot ang binata. So personally, I haven't experienced or seen a karagatan, but it's good to know that in the past, maybe in some other parts of the country, they would still do this. I would hear some old people sharing in some places that they experienced doing this karagatan. Okay, another is, okay, so that's this is the Tagalog description. Okay, you can go back to this description to understand better what the karagatan is. It's something unique that we do not usually see nowadays. We also have what we call the duplo, which is a poetic joust in speaking and reasoning. So it's a kind of a contest, okay, and you have to present your argument properly, okay, to win a kind of the battle in speaking and reasoning. We also have what we call the prose narratives. Okay, so I told you last lesson that when I speak of prose, it's free compared to poetry. And when I speak about narratives, it's a story. It narrates a story. So when we say prose narratives, these are instructional materials that teach Filipinos proper decorum. Okay, so that's a specific meaning of prose narratives in the colonial times. It's something that reminds us of how to behave, the proper decorum in different situations. So a good example and famous example is ang pagsusulatan ng dalawang binibini na sina Urbana at Feliza, okay, 1864. And then we also have a type of drama during the Spanish time, okay, which of course show influence of Spaniards. Okay, we call it zarzuela, and it's a kind of drama, but it employs singing, and like a simple play wherein you just kind of act, but zarzuela is more of an old school musical. Okay, but of course you can expect that the musical forms used for the songs or for the lines are also exhibiting characteristics of Spanish music. Okay, so it includes singing and dancing on stage with lyrics alternatively spoken and sung in operatic and popular styles. Okay, so when you say operatic, it's a style of singing which uses more resonance, more air. Okay, the way Pavarotti, Andrea Bocelli would sing. No? So di ba pag sila yung kumanta, iba yung timbre, iba yung lakas. La donna immobile, qual piuma al vento, muta dal sento e di pensiero. Iba yung style. So even in the Philippines, you have Jerfil Flores, for example, who kind of try to revive the operatic style of singing. But that's the kind of singing that you will hear in a zarzuela. Okay? The singers, the female singers may not open too much their mouth, but you can hear very clearly, loudly, their sweet voice. Okay, so those are the things that the genres that kind of flourished during the Spanish period in its first uh, kind of centuries. But of course, towards the last part of Spanish period, Spanish colonization, the 3rd century, okay, we have kind of changes, especially because some of the Filipinos, some of our ilustrados have been educated and they kind of been influenced by cultures in other parts of the globe. So the exposure of the evils of the Spanish rule in the Philippines was because of Rizal's novels, No La Mitangere and El Filibusterismo, which paved the way to a revolution against Spain. So aside from Rizal's work, of course, we have other literature or things written by Lopez Haina, like the Fray Botod, which we also mentioned last time. We also have the works of Del Pilar, his essays in the Diaryong Tagalog, and of course, Haina's articles in La Solidaridad. Okay, so revolutionary literature also loomed with exposes that sparked revolution and resistance among the Filipinos. Even Andres Bonifacio has his own contribution, The Katungkulang Gagawin ng Mga Anak ng Bayan, is one of his writings. writings. And Apolinario Mabini also has his own contribution, El Desarrollo y Caída de la República Filipina, The Rise and Fall of Philippine Republic. Also, Emilio Jacinto, he has this collection of essays called Liwanag at Dilim, not Liwanag sa Dilim, Liwanag at Dilim, which was on work, faith, freedom, government, and patriotism. Okay, so of course, our national heroes were the ones who kind of contributed much during the latter, the end part of the Spanish regime. As for the American period, the literature during the American period was imitative of the form of American writing. Okay, so we know that with education, the Americans kind of introduced us to their culture, to their literature. That's why many Filipinos try to imitate some of the features of American literature. That's why it's called imitative. Okay. Now, during the Japanese period and the Republic, okay, with the coming of the Japanese invaders, Philippine literature came to a halt. The English language was banned and the Filipino language was mandated under Japanese rule. So this is one of the things that I've asked during the first mid-quarterly exam, okay, how this particular event in our history became advantageous to our Filipino literature. So many plays during this time, instead of being staged using the English medium, they were reproduced to using this time our native language, specifically Tagalog. Okay, and writing during the Japanese reign were journalistic in nature. So it's more on news form, a journalism form. People felt suppressed, but the spirit of nationalism slowly seeped into their consciences through essays. Okay, Filipinos were able to compose articles that glorify Filipinos and kind of figuratively attack the Japanese. So with metaphors, with symbols, somehow Filipino writers were able to attack the Japanese regime. Now, in the 21st century literature of the Philippines, all literary works written and published at the later part of 21st century, it's from 2001 onwards, are often characterized by these important characteristics. Okay, this is something that I mentioned a bit in lesson 1, but just to emphasize again, if we'll try to look into the difference, the one thing that we'll notice in present time writings or written works among Filipinos is that it exhibits these characteristics. It touches on gender sensitivity issues, technological uh, concerns. Okay, it's culturally pluralistic nowadays and operates on the extreme reality or extreme fiction, and even questions conventions and supposedly absolute norms. So there are ways or attempts to kind of really introduce something very different, something new that has not been used in the past. Okay, but if we'll ask as to what particular genres we have in our present times, we can mention the following. First is drama. It is a genre of literature with stories composed of verse or prose, which is meant to be dramatically or theatrically performed. Its emotions and conflicts are expressed through dialogue and movements or actions. So if in the sarsuela, it's more of the operatic singing. When we speak of drama, it's more of the movement, the dialogue, the tone, maybe the pitch, maybe the dynamics of the voice, okay, but not so much of singing. So if that's the description, that it's talking more about drama. Okay, we also have what we call the creative nonfiction. Okay, so actually many write-ups nowadays would also be uh, falling under this particular genre. Okay, so perhaps when we go to bookstore, book sale, or national bookstore, okay, or other bookstores, the first group of books that might catch our attention will be the fictions, the novels. But mind you, there is another big group we call the creative nonfiction. So it's also known as literary nonfiction or narrative nonfiction, which is a genre of writing that uses literary styles and techniques to create factually accurate narratives. So it talks about truth, but the truth is presented in a very colorful, in a very stylistic way. Okay, so it involves element of reflection, imagination. Okay, that kinds of brings us deeper and closer to the reality, to the truth, or to the event. Okay, some authors believe that even the Gospels could be classified under creative nonfiction. Okay, so it talks about truth, the reality about the life of Jesus, but in a very colorful way. Matthew has his own way of telling the same truth. Luke has his own style. Okay, so they are using imaginative expressions or different styles, but at the bottom of it, the core message is the same: the truth about Jesus, the Son of God, okay, who made man. Okay, so another group of write-ups maybe that we can put under creative nonfiction would be the documentaries that talk about the life of people, but sometimes they put some embellishments, and that way we enjoy more knowing and learning the truth. Okay, another present form of literature to which we are maybe very familiar with is what we call the blog. It's a web log containing short articles called posts that can be changed regularly. Some blogs are written by one person called a blogger, containing his or her hobbies or interests, opinions, and experiences, while others are written by many different people. I know that some students sometimes would even get answers in their assignments from blogs. Okay, but mind you, when you say blog, it's more of the opinion interest of the blogger. Okay, so if you would like to get a more academic or something that has undergone um, just what we call peer review, you may better go to a published book for a research topic instead of going to a blog. Okay, of course, we have poetry nowadays, but it has kind of evolved, and there are new ways of presenting poetry. So it's a verse and rhythmic writing with imagery that evokes an emotional response from the reader. So we said last time it's imagistic. It is using images that bring us to the message of the poem, and it's a bit challenging. It's using suggestion, implication, ambiguity rather than straightforward communication. That's why we also love poems, because they make us think, huh, what does the author really want to say through these words, through these lines. But with the passing of time, of course, we have different forms nowadays of poems, of poetry. We have the mobile phone text tula. Okay, so it's a shorter form of poetry, usually in the form of a tanaga, okay, consisting of 4 lines with 7 syllables with the same rhyme, and at the end of each line, that is 777, 7777. So 4 lines with 7 syllable each. But nowadays, with the modern tanaga, the dual rhyme forms can take different formats. It can be AABB, first and second lines rhyme, third and fourth rhyme, or it can be ABAB, first and third, second and fourth, or ABBA, first and fourth, second and third. Okay, so those are symbols that tell us of which lines would rhyme in a tanaga, in a mobile phone text tula. Okay, but there are even what we call freestyle forms, wherein you have AAAB. Okay, only the 3 lines, the first 3 lines with the kind of rhyme, or the BAAA, or even the ABCD. All the lines will have different syllables at the end. So they do not have titles usually, because a tanaga should speak for itself. However, moderns can opt to give them titles. Textula is often read on cellular phones. Actually, if I will be asked, maybe uh, in the during the campaign period for the national elections, there have been poetry by supporters of different candidates that they would post on their Facebook account. And I can also consider this, we may also consider this as maybe PC textula or desktop textula, but the point is almost the same. They are short poems that are presented with the use of internet, electronics, and the gadgets and different apps and platforms. We also have what we call the hyper poetry. It is a form of digital poetry that uses links using hypertext markup or the HTML, which allows a user to click a link and be redirected to a new page referenced by that link. So the links mean that the hypertext poem has no set order. The poem moving or being generated in response to the links that the reader or user chooses. So which one you would like to to uh, to read next? So I'll be posting on our stream links, YouTube links, especially for you to have an idea of what this hyper poetry is and some other examples. An example of spoken word poetry, of other haranas that you may want to watch during your free time. So watch for them. Wait for the posting. You can go to them so that you can understand better what hyper poetry is all about. Okay, so of course we have the spoken word poetry. Okay, so we're familiar with this, we millennials, you millennials. This is type of poem performed or read in artistic and emotive, punong-puno ng emosyon, emotive manner, which can be accompanied by music or presented in the streets or bars or even in cafe shops. I don't know if you have seen one personally, okay, but I have a friend from UP who was really good with this, and he even got some awards. Okay, but of course, there are a lot of materials of spoken word poetry and available in the internet. Again, I'll be posting an example of spoken word poetry on our stream together with the handouts and the presentation this afternoon. So again, if you have time for your own culture to deepen your understanding about the things that we are speaking about this afternoon, please do watch those short links. Who knows, they may inspire you that you may also make your own. And actually, one of your performance tests is making your own material for spoken word poetry and then recording yourself, and that's your performance test. So you can put your heart out in that activity and really express your insight, your thoughts, what's in your heart. Okay, so just kind of the last group of genres which we experience nowadays, which we encounter nowadays, we have what we call fiction. So fiction is a general term, an umbrella term, okay, that they can be defined as narrative. They are kind of a story, literary works whose content is produced by the imagination. They are not real, and it's not necessarily based on fact. In fiction, something is feigned. Okay, that means pretended to be, or pretension. If we say feigned, okay, there's a pretending that is happening, then invented or imagined, or a made-up story. So it's not real, but fiction nowadays comes in many different forms. Okay, this is not exhaustive, but these are the more common fiction that we encounter in our present time. So we have the short story. Okay, it's a brief fiction that can be read in one sitting and it's not able to support any subplots. One simple story that you can finish in one sitting, short story. That's how we call it. You also have what they call the chick lit. Okay, this is a genre which addresses issues of modern womanhood. Okay, remember that that important term when speak about modern womanhood, which is presented humorously or light-heartedly. Okay, medyo light, medyo nakakatawa. Okay, magaan, presentation. It's called chiclet. And we also have what we call a very short fiction, the flash fiction, style of fictional literature or fiction of extreme brevity. This is shorter than short story. There is no widely accepted definition of the length of the category, but some flash fiction impose caps as low as only 300 words. So ganun siya kaikli. You want to say flash fiction. We also have realistic fiction, a story that can actually happen and is true to real life. Okay, an example maybe is a class prophecy. So you kind of prophesy about your class 10 years from now, and then you have this reunion. Maybe someone is coming riding a helicopter. Someone has become a president of the Philippines. So it's something like a realistic fiction. Okay, who knows? It might come true. And we also have historical fiction. It is a story with fictional characters and events in a historical setting. Okay, fictional characters and events in historical setting. Maybe in the time of Rizal, you put someone, even in the movies. There are upcoming series in some networks that are using historical fiction. They are putting Maria Clara, okay, or a new Maria Clara back in the past. Okay, in some movies, we also have this with the sort of time machine or time travel elements. Okay, we also have, of course, horror, frightfully shocking, terrifying, or revolting stories. Mahilig ba kayo sa horror? And si Mrs. mahilig sa horror, mga Japanese horror movies. Okay, we also have mystery. It deals with unraveling of secrets and solution of a crime. Yan, yung mga mystery novels. We also have illustrated novels. These are stories through text and illustrated images, not necessarily comic type, but there are big pictures that appear from time to time. And then we have the graphic novels. Ito naman yung comic book format. The entire novel is in a comic book format. And then we have what we call the speculative fiction. Okay, that includes science fiction, fantasy, and even humor. So it's a term encompassing the more fantastical fiction genres. Okay, sci-fi, weird fiction, supernatural fiction, superhero fiction, utopian and dystopian fiction, even apocalyptic fiction, and alternate history in literature, as well as related static motion and virtual arts. So speculative fiction is a broad term also. Okay, so for your assignment number 2, this is more of a research work. You'll just have to copy paste. Okay, so please follow the instruction. Research for the following and attach your answers to the assignment document in our Google Classroom. Okay, so we are to look for one riddle with answer in any dialect, and then one proverb in any dialect also, one song, so title and the lyrics, then one epic. Okay, so when I say one song, it can be a harana, it can be an uyayi, it can be a folk song. Okay, one epic, so just the title and the summary of the epic. You can find a lot of summaries in the internet. Then one myth, just go back to the definition again of each of these genres. Okay, and then one folk tale. Okay, for the folk tale, the title and the entire text of the folk tale. So you don't need to type, just cut and paste it on the respective boxes on the table provided. Okay, so that much I would like to discuss under lesson 2. Okay, so just wait for the link and you can enter the Google Classroom for our next lessons 3 and 4, this time synchronous with teacher in real time. See you.